me tell you something. When you will to love somebody, you can. So, wow. Now, I don't want to take away from everything he said, but a lot of what he says is very true. Without the will, it's a drudgery. Without the emotions, it's a mockery. And you need both. You need that emotional stirring within you, but you need the will to honor and keep that commitment. Let your goodness not be like the morning cloud or like the dew. Next time you feel his presence, make that commitment, but nurture that commitment so his presence will ever be felt with you day after day after day. And that will is surrendered. You see, God's love is unmerited. His heartache is our will. His response is, I will be to you as a moth, I will be to you as a lion, I will remove my presence and depart from you. What does a moth do? It weakens. What does a lion do? It tears apart. He said, I'll beat you as a moth, weakening your land. If you don't respond, I'll beat you as a lion, tearing up your nation. If you still don't respond, I will remove my presence and depart from you. May I dare suggest, living where I do in the United States, we are probably in that third stage right now. Ashley and I had a talk about this in Atlanta at one stage when he first came to talk to me about coming here. We lack wisdom. We lack wisdom. Do you know we talk so much about human rights? Ask the person who talks to you about human rights if they know that it also means to give a person the right to be human. What does it mean to be human? Talk to an average university student in North America, ask them to define life and purpose, ask them to define meaning, ask them to define absolutes, ask them to define love. All of these terms are with their feet firmly planted in midair. There's no solidity to it anymore. Purely relativistic. I was at UCLA last week, California, liberal campus, and they asked me to speak on tolerance. Do you know how many showed up on that Wednesday night? Nearly 3,000 of them. You had to open up an extra room. And when we did the same subject at Clemson in the South, 9,000. When John Lennox, Michael Ramsden, two of my colleagues, and I did an open forum on the defense of the Christian faith at the University of Arizona, which is one of the largest universities in the country. A few months before us, Richard Dawkins was there. They drew 3,000. When we did our open forum, they moved us to the basketball arena. Over 9,000 showed up for that. The hunger. They want answers to these questions. I give you this quote and move finally to my last thought. G.K. Chesterton, describing the world to which we were entering, said it in these powerful words. Please turn on the intensity of thinking here, because this is a mouthful of a quote. The new rebel who rebels against everything is a skeptic and will not entirely trust anything. He has no loyalty, therefore he can never be a true revolutionist. And the fact that he doubts everything gets in his way when he wants to denounce anything. For all denunciation implies a moral doctrine of some kind, and the modern revolutionist doubts not only the institution he denounces, but the doctrine by which he denounces it. So he writes one book complaining that imperial oppression insults the purity of women, then he writes another book, a novel, in which he insults it himself. He curses the Sultan because Christian girls lose their virginity, then curses Mrs. Grundy because they keep it. As a politician, he cries out that war is a waste of life, then as a philosopher, that life itself is a waste of time. A Russian pessimist will denounce a policeman for killing a peasant, then prove by the highest philosophical principles that the peasant ought to have killed himself. A man denounces marriage as a lie, then denounces aristocratic profligates for treating it as a lie. The man of this school goes first to a political meeting where he complains that savages are treated as if they were beasts. Then he takes his hat and umbrella and goes to a scientific meeting where he proves that they practically are beasts. In short, the modern revolutionist, being an infinite skeptic, is always engaged in undermining his own minds. In his book on politics, he attacks men for trampling on morality. In his book on ethics, he attacks morality for trampling on men. Therefore, the modern man in revolt has become practically useless for all purposes of revolt. By rebelling against everything, he's lost his right to rebel against anything. It is Chesterton who went on to say, the tragedy of disbelieving in God is not that a man ends up believing in nothing, alas, it is much worse. He may end up believing in anything. Wisdom. You know, our Richard Dawkins was recently interviewed and he made an astounding comment. He said, just because you're hungry doesn't mean there is such a thing as food. He's countering Lewis's existential argument. But he was on a radio program on the BBC, you may have read it, it was absolutely fascinating. And he said to the former dean of St. Paul's, he looked at him, he himself is a bit of a liberal, but fascinating, he was taking on Dawkins. And he looked at the dean and he said to him, you know what? Most Christians can't really name the four Gospels or even one Gospel. And the dean looked at him and he said, Richard, your favorite book is The Origin of Species? Yeah. Could you name the whole title? He said, yeah, I know the title. He said, go ahead. And I'm quoting you now, forgive me. He's on the air. He says, yeah, the title goes, The Origin of Species. Oh my God. Even an atheist had to call upon God to remind him of the book from which he stopped believing in him. By means of natural selection. You couldn't get those words out of his mouth. One president in Africa, after I finished speaking to the African presidents, took me by the arm. We're walking away, and he put his arm in mine, and he said, Mr. Zacharias, our cumulative wisdom is unable to meet the daunting challenges of our time. Where do you go for wisdom? Where do you go to face the tough questions of life? You know, God's response is if you keep shunning him, he will leave you bereft of wisdom. A moth weakens, you can handle that a little bit when you feel the fragility. It destroys when all is in ruins, you can handle that. But when you don't even have recourse to wisdom, pretty tough stuff. I look at the West today, and Australia is no exception in our cultural wars. It's the same stuff out here. We think we're going to solve all this stuff politically. Have you taken a look at the heart of some of the politicians lately? That's right. Yeah. Corruption is here. It's inside. We really think in America we've got somebody's going to solve all of our problems. Materially, emotionally, this and that, and just by the stroke of a pen, we're going to solve it. The country has never been more divided. The country has never been more of a monetary and fiscal mess than it is right now in its entire history. What's the biggest problem in India, the world's largest democracy? Corruption is systemic and endemic. And then we think we're going to solve it. No. God's response is pretty tough. And finally he says, you know what? If you'll turn to me, I'll heal your backsliding. I'll love you freely. Mine anger is turned away from you. The only recourse is to take that U-turn and come back to him. I don't know how far away from him you are today. I really don't know. But take that U-turn. He's waiting for you. A great Canadian evangelist by the name of Chuck Templeton, who was a great preacher. I still believe I'm saying to him, you'd have been the evangelist of the world, Chuck, if you'd stayed on top. But he walked away, took his postgraduate studies, lost his belief in God and so on. Lee Strobel, who went to interview him afterwards, before he died. I don't know what happened between that time too, and when he did die, by the way, in a conversation with Dr. Brown. But Lee looked at him and he said, Chuck, where's Jesus now in your life? He said, I want to say to you, I really miss him. I really miss him. You see, he puts life together for you. He's the skin that holds together the necessary components that you cannot keep together unless God puts it together for you. I'll close with this illustration. They gave me plenty of time. It's just that I'm so disorganized. Run out of it. So Let me hurriedly give this to you. In the year 1971, when I was in my 20s, I was in Vietnam, preaching the length and breadth of the country, changed my whole life, brought revival in Vietnam. My interpreter, I've told the story in my book, I think, Walking from East to West. My interpreter was a 17-year-old guy by the name of Hien Pham. 17 years old, I was 25, 17, cumulative years, 42. And we're traveling around the country by motorbike, and U.S. military choppers and C-130, all this stuff, very young. And when I bid him goodbye, I said, Hien, I don't know if I'll ever see you again. Thousands came to know Christ. I had my one sermon book, used to put it in my jacket pocket, preach from that, the length of the country. I was still an undergrad student in theology. 17 years went by. 1988, I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, speaking 11 o'clock at night. My phone rings. Brother Ravi. I said, Hien? He said, how did you know to your brother Ravi? I said, where are you? He said, I'm in California. I said, what on earth are you doing here? He said, have you got some time? I said, yeah, tell me. He said, after Vietnam fell, the Viet Cong arrested me, put me in prison, because they said I was with the CIA. I said, I'm not with the CIA. I'm a teenager. They said, oh, you interpreted. See, I interpreted for them as a translator. I had nothing to do with the American troops or anything other than being a translator in their commissaries and all this. They said, no, we're imprisoning you. And when they imprisoned him, they took away from him any English language books. They only gave him Marx and Engels, Marx and Engels, Marx and Engels, and Vietnamese and French. They tried to knock God out of me. Finally, one day he said, I got so tired. I said, maybe God is not there. He said, my brother Rafi, I thought of you and your messages and all that we saw together. I kept thinking of you so much. But I was struggling. They were beating it out of me. And one night I said, tomorrow morning when I wake up, no God, no prayer. He said, in the morning they assigned me to clean the latrines. And when I walked into the latrine, I looked at the tin pot in there with all used toilet paper and human excrement. I had a mask over my head. He said, but I thought I saw something in English. I turned around, washed it, put it into my hip pocket. That night, late at night in bed, while everybody was asleep under my mosquito net in this room, I pulled out the piece of paper on the right-hand corner. It said Romans chapter 8. Started reading it, and all things work together for good. He said, I sobbed under my mosquito net, because he said, who shall separate us from the love of God? He said, Jesus, you wouldn't leave me for even one day. He said, long story, I finally was released, and I started to build a boat to escape with 52 others. 4 days before I was to escape, Viet Cong come knocking on my door, armed to the teeth. I say, are you trying to escape? He said, no. He said, are you telling us the truth? He said, yes. After they left, I said, there I go, God, again, trying to do this my way. He said, I prayed a prayer I hope it will never be answered. Lord, if you want me to tell them the truth, let them come back. So the day before I was to leave, they come grab me by the collar, ram me against a wall. You're trying to escape, and you said, yes, with 52 others. Are you going to arrest me again? They said, no, we want to go with you. 4 of these guys got onto the boat with them, and he said, we were caught on the high seas and we were going to capsize, but these 4 guys were such good mariners, they got us to safety in Thailand. He said, and then I was given refugee status. I came to the United States. I'm doing my business degree at Berkeley now. And he said, I'm just calling to ask if you'll come and officiate at my wedding. I met a beautiful young gal, a Vietnamese gal here that I want you to officiate. And this goes on and on. He came to visit me in Atlanta, and he sat down with my kids across the table, and they were so young then. And he said, you know what? You're always tempted to do it your way. He said, don't. He said, do it his way. He will honor and he will bless you. You know what? I don't know where you're at in your life, but if you're a typical audience, there's some of you tempted to do it your way. God's love, God's heartache, God's response, and God's hope. I will heal you backsliding. I will love you freely, for mine anger is turned away from you. God invites you to come and celebrate that relationship. And I'm going to ask you to pray with me now, this time.